Jungkook was wearing sunglasses as the sunlight was very intense today. He drove all the way to Vian's house to pick her up from her parents' house. It was just been a few hours that Jungkook left her here. As she said, she wants to talk to them. But Jungkook had some important work, so he couldn't stay. After getting done with the work, Jungkook drives back there, and when her house was in sight, he could already see her standing outside the house, talking to someone from inside. You said it will be a few hours, but why isn't he coming? Why did you even come here in the first place? Vine's mom said to her in an angry tone and rolled her eyes. Vine's mom, if you really want to come here, then you should bring your billionaire husband with you. You alone don't have a space in this house. She said, and was about to close the door on Vine's face. But she took a step inside and said, "Wait, listen to me." Before Vine could speak, her mother pushed her out of the house and closed the door immediately. Vine was going to fall on her back, but before she knew, she landed in someone's arms. She immediately got up and looked behind, only to see her husband looking at her with desperate eyes, while the confusion occupied his space. He looked at the tears that were in her eyes. She was startled to see him there, so she immediately looked away and wiped her teary eyes. She turned back to him with a smile on her face as she said, "I'm sorry. I just fell by mistake. Are you okay?" She said, trying her best to fake smile. "Jungkook, your fake smile is not very appealing. You should smile by your heart, for it suits you," he said while wiping her tear softly from her cheek. She was surprised of his behavior as she stared at him for a few seconds, while he did the same back to her. "Wine, it's not fake. I was waiting for you to come. Let's go now," she said hesitatingly as she started walking towards his car, but stopped when he said, "Jungkook, wait, now that we are here, let's say hi to your parents. I suddenly want to meet them badly," he said as he rang the doorbell of her parents' house, without letting her say no to him. "Wine, what are you doing? Let's go. You already met them while dropping me here." "Jungkook, come on. I came till here. It will be a shame if I don't meet them." "Wine, wait, but the door is open. Let's go inside," he said and walked inside immediately. He went to the living room, followed by Vine, who was scared to come inside again. As they entered, her mom was already waiting for them, with a smile on her face. Vine's mom, "Look, who is here again? My son can't live without me for even a few hours, right?" she said and spreaded her arms to hug Jungkook. But he walked past her and sat on the couch with his legs crossed, pretending he didn't see her. Jungkook, of course, I wanted to meet you. I have something important to talk to you about too. And I was suddenly missing you a lot, he said while staring at her mother with his dark smile on the face. Wine quietly sat beside him, and coffee was served to them by the maid. Jungkook, how are you doing nowadays? Wine's mom, is that a thing to ask? I'm perfectly fine and peaceful here. Jungkook, oh, you would be, as you're living in the house gifted by me, he said as he took a sip of the coffee. Her mother's laughing expressions changed in an instant, and there was silence all around. He liked it, but he laughed and said, why are you all so serious? It was just a joke. Wine's mother fake laughed at him and said, of course it is. We know. Jungkook, yes, and hopefully you pay me back the money for this house soon, as you promised. There was quietness again, for Wine was listening to all of this, and as her mother quietened down, she felt uncomfortable and put a hand on his thigh as she said, Jungkook, Jungkook, what? They promised they would do this. He looked at her mother and said, and it's a good thing. What's the big deal? Wine's mother was burning from inside by now, as she said, of course, there's no big deal. Jungkook smiled at her and got up from the couch to go. Jungkook, and I hope it's soon, he said in his mind, because if I make you pay back, you wouldn't be able to stand and laugh, just like you're doing right now. Jungkook, we'll take a leave now. Thanks for the coffee. And it was a pleasure to meet you. Jungkook held Vine's hand while looking at her mother. Jungkook, and don't worry about your daughter. I won't spare anyone who messes with her, he said with his dangerous tone, smiled, and walked away, together with Vine. Jungkook said in his mind, only if Vine wasn't here, I would have taught you the way one should treat their daughter. Jungkook and Vine sat in his car, for she looked at him with questionable eyes, but didn't speak anything. Jungkook, have you had a good time with your mom? Vine, I don't understand why suddenly you're doing all of this. If you saw something earlier, then you must be mistaken. It's nothing like. Jungkook looked in her eyes intensely and said, is it really nothing like I suppose it to be? Vine looked in his eyes and quietened down for a while. Jungkook, besides, you don't need to take her side anymore, because you're not hers anymore. You're mine now, he said while looking straight ahead and started driving after saying, Vine looked at him with confusion, as she wanted to correct him that she will always be her mother's. But she didn't say anything because she liked the way he said it. and she was actually blushing from inside. She looked ahead and smiled the whole way till their home. After reaching home, he put off his seatbelt and took a sigh before speaking. You need to tell me if something's going on with you. He looked at her and holding her hand, he came towards her forehead to kiss it. Her eyes widened at this sudden behavior, and she blushed like a mad woman. Then he looked in her eyes and said, I can take care of you if you tell me about yourself. Let's go now. I'm craving your sushis. He said so normally and went away, like it was nothing. But for Vine, it meant something completely different that never happened before. She got frozen at her place for a few seconds, trying to process what's happening. She looked at his bag as he was leaving and smiled again before running towards him to walk with him in a sink. As they were walking together, her hand touched his hand by mistake. So she got a little away from him. He looked at her, getting shy, so he smiled and held her hand to walk with her. She looked at him surprisingly, who was already looking at her with a smile on his face. She couldn't hide her blush anymore. She smiled to him and looked downwards, while getting shy, as they both walked inside their home together.